Yes, Mr. Nickel, come up here. Our folks from EBMUD. Ms. Messer, how do you wish to proceed?
Well, I think I'm just going to give a very brief introduction, and I think it was an excuse to get my 15 seconds of FaceTime up here. So, and I'm going to turn it over to Eric after that. So, thank you, Chair. You pretty much covered everything I think I was going to say, but I would like to introduce Eric Nickel. As most of you know Eric, he's one of our senior engineers in the Delta Plan Division, and he's going to be providing the update this morning. We are also joined by Eileen White from East Bay Mud, and as the Chair said, this is an action item, and so we'll be seeking approval after the presentation. So,
thanks, Cindy.
Mr. Nickel.
And I think Cindy was introduced as an engineer inadvertently, which is an insult to a scientist, but
I thought he was joking.
Quite a compliment from an engineer. So I think Phil Eisenberg basically gave most of my presentation already, so he laid out the fact that these projects, this is the second batch of the total of 10 projects. What you're seeing today is 4 of the remaining 5 projects. So you approved the first 5 in July of 2011. Those projects are being implemented right now. They're on the ground. They're getting work done. And actually, Eileen White with East Bay Mud is going to give us a brief status update in a few moments. But what you see before you is 4 of the remaining 5. The reason why the 5th is not with this packet is it's still undergoing some additional environmental review. And at such time as it's ready, it'll come back before the council for final review. And so quickly, I think maybe what might be the easiest is to actually have Eileen just quickly run through her status update. And if there's any questions, the council members can jump in, and then we can probably run through the last remaining items afterwards and then put it to a vote.
Okay. Ms. White?
Oh, yeah. How do we click through the slides?
Okay, great.
A finger.
We lack a clicker, but we'll get one at the next meeting.
Yes, great. I just wanted to update you. As Phil mentioned, we first came to the council in June of 2010, and we had some more work to do to make the packages more complete. And we came back on July 28th. Okay, and I just wanted to update you. The 5 projects were approved by the Delta Stewardship Council on July 28th of last year, and the question was asked, would we be ready to go to work right away? Could we delay approving these? And I want to thank you for approving them, and I think you guys should feel proud because the projects were advertised in August. They were awarded to the contractors in September. We issued notice to proceed in October. And the positive side of this dry year, being the water supply manager for East Bay Mud, is we took advantage of the dry winter. And you'll see in the photos I have to be able to do a lot of construction through the winter. And basically, we've been able to place 900,000 tons of import fill to improve the stability of these levees. And basically, 4 out of the 5 projects are almost complete since they were approved in July of last year. And just to remind you that the islands we were talking about, the projects that were approved were on Lower Roberts, Upper Jones, Lower Jones, Woodwood, and Palm. And Palm is the one island we have not started yet, and I'll explain why as I take you through the photos. I just want to remind you what we're doing. This is a typical levee cross-section coming from an engineer. I'll be real basic, but the crown is the top part. I don't have a pointer, and then you have the landslide slope. And then the next slide shows you the PL 8499 standard, which is you're widening the crown, you're flattening the slope. So you're basically improving, you're making these much stronger. And this is the Corps of Engineers.
The base widens a bit.
The base widens significantly. You'll be able to see it in some of these photos, but this is just kind of a cross-section. As I show you photos, you're like, I wanted to orient you, that it's really widening it. So it's making it really strong. You're making the crest much wider, and then the slopes you're flattening out and just making them much stronger. And with that, here's a photo from Lower Roberts, and you can see here, this is the start of the habitat setback. And as part of these projects, we're trying to meet the co-equal goals. We're not only improving these levees to protect the critical infrastructure in the Delta, but we're also improving these levees to protect the ecosystems. And as part of the work we've done, we've developed habitat setbacks. We've also, on the waterside slope, we've expanded the slope so that we can go ahead and plant trees for riverine habitat. And you'll see that as we go through. So this is the Lower Roberts Island under construction. The next slide shows you Lower Jones Tract. This is the barge placing the embankment fill. As I said, 900,000 tons of fill is a lot of material. And it was either came by trucks or barge. And as you can note, the date on this photo was December 13th. Being the second driest December on record, we took advantage of it and have been able to make incredible progress since you approved these projects last July. So this is Lower Jones Tract, and you can see the barge. This is Lower Jones. You can see the back slope along Middle River that they're widening it out, and you can see the trucks. The trucks coming in. It's a very organized operation. We wanted to make sure we minimize traffic impacts, and then they leave and they go back to the quarry and come back again. So we're also putting a lot of people to work in these tight economic times with these 5 construction projects. Next slide. This is Lower Jones, and once again, you can see, how we're flattening out the slope there, and you can see the trucks, a lot of people being put to work by bringing in the import fill to these projects. Next slide.
Eileen, before you, well, this slide's okay too, but so what's the distance from what would be the new toe of your levee with your increased slope? You have some variations. You get some 3-to-1s, 4-to-1s, 5-to-1s. But what's the breadth, say, from Riverside to back of toe generally? 200 feet, 300 feet, 100 feet?
It's probably several hundred feet. It varies on the material that you have. And on a number of these, as we work to finalize the scope of work with the Department of Fish and Game, we actually made it much wider to allow for tree planting on the waterside slope for riverine habitat. So it varies from each levee. Each one's unique, each island and how they want it. But generally, it's a lot of these are being built to a much higher standard than the PL 8499 with a slide slope. Because per the PL 84, it can vary, as you said, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1. Some of these were at a 5-to-1 slide slope, and we started off, much steeper, as you could see.
So, just with that, say several hundred feet, so you could have some of those cross sections could be 500 or 600 feet from Riverside waterline to.
I'd say several hundred. I'm not sure it's quite that. I'd have
several. Okay, that's what I'm just trying to get some idea. So several is it 300 or 400 feet then?
I'd say about 200, 300 feet potentially. And so, and what we're doing is we're working with DF&G as we're finalizing these scopes to make sure it meets their. We're the engineers and the material, and we're thinking of the stability, and then they're telling us what works best. I'm not a fisheries expert, but I have. We operate the McCalmy River to meet all fishery needs. And likewise, out here, we're working very closely with DF&G and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and taking their input as we finalize the scope and work with the contractor.
And just the reason I asked the question, at least in part, is that to get some sense, though, of the magnitude when again, this is the PL 8499, maybe a bit better than that in some cases, but when you talk about widening or strengthening levees and so forth, that the footprint, because of all the various things that come into play, this begins to demonstrate that it's not just the revetment on the water side or flattening out a bit of the wider crown. You start having significant impact again because that's the way it's being done, but to the areas that are being again encroached upon permanently as it relates to certainly to the land side in a lot of cases. So, it's a much different footprint than in some cases exists out there now.
It definitely. In fact, I think ideally after these projects are done, it'd be neat to do an aerial flyover, and you'd be able to see the very narrow crest, and then afterwards see the wide crest and how basically we've worked with the landowners and they understand the importance of these projects, but we've encroached on other property because it's going to look very different at the end when all the projects are complete. You're very correct. It's definitely taking more land to make these to buttress them up. Any more questions before we go on?
Okay, council questions. Randy? No. Nope.
And then, okay, great. And then the next one's just showing you this is Woodwood. And then once again, you kind of see, back to Don, your point, how the back slope, it's going way out from what it originally was to flatten it out, to be able to buttress up the levee and improve the stability of the levee. We're basically adding this import fill.
And the Santa Fe cut is the railroad.
Correct. One of the pieces of infrastructure. And you can even see the pipeline, East Bay Mud's pipeline in the background there. And then if we continue to the next one, This shows you the barge, and the one reason we haven't started Palm Island, as I mentioned, 4 out of the 5 projects are almost complete. The only one we haven't started is Palm Island because we want to use that same barge out there to leverage that. We're trying to minimize truck impacts. So Woodward's just about complete, and then they're going to move the barge over and do Palm Island next. So basically 4 out of the 5 projects are complete. We've reduced the risk of levee failures in the Delta. We've protected assets of statewide importance, which is what was tasked with this funding that was put aside. We've also met the co-equal goals of the Stewardship Council by also making sure we're taking into account ecosystem restoration as we do these projects. And so in closing, I just want to thank the Stewardship Council for approving these projects. I think it's been a great partnership between the Stewardship Council, between DWR and the reclamation districts, and I think it's a real success story that you should be proud of.
Okay. Questions, comments? Okay. Ms. Messer.
Okay, so I'm guessing the next step here, Eric, is to probably discuss the next 4 projects.
Yes. So essentially, these four of the remaining 5 projects are very similar to the 5 that Eileen just ran through. These projects are totaling a request of approximately $13.5 million. So as you see in the staff report, we've summarized our review of the materials for each of those 4 projects. Right. We've reviewed the project scopes of work, the CEQA compliance documentation, the environmental review documentation, as well as agency approvals that we've received from both California Department of Fish and Game and the Department of Water Resources. And so we've wrapped up our review. It was a very similar process to the first 5, and we feel that everything that's been provided has been more than adequate, and we recommend to the council that these projects be approved.
There'll be one additional project coming at some point, the 5th and remaining project, and when do the folks anticipate that might happen?
That could be several months. We're working through with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and DFG as far as some species and some environmental issues, so it could be several months. And we didn't want to delay these other 4 projects because they're actually bigger projects, and we want to take advantage of also the very competitive bid climate right now. We were fortunate on these 5 projects that got awarded in October. Because of the economy, we're getting good value for our money, and so we wanted to take advantage of that and putting these other 4 projects out to bid rather delay it potentially up to another 5 months for that 5th project.
Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, again, for Eileen or Eric, these projects then, in addition to doing the work that's outlined to the levees themselves, you're actually then going to have staging areas that will have stockpile material in the event there is some need in the future, either emergency and or. So how much of the material then is accounted for in the 900,000 tons and or just on maybe on a ratio? You're doing the work, importing material, but you're also going to then leave some there for future needs should it arise. Is that
and that's correct. So far we've placed 900,000 tons. I think at the end, it's closer to 2 million tons that will have been placed just to buttresses. And I don't have the precise number. I'd have to look back up and add them up. But you're correct. We are having riprap there. So in the event that something does happen, there's an earthquake, and we need to go ahead and buttress up a levee. I don't know that exact number. I don't know if Eric or...
Okay, I don't. We can ask DWR, or if you need to find out.
I don't need an exact number, but I just get some sense of the magnitude then of where you're going to... And then you've had to set aside an area to accomplish that. So I assume it's strategically located relative to access in the future for garnering that material should you need it.
And that's correct. And we've been coordinating with DWR because DWR also has projects that they're doing to also acquire material to buttress up levees in the Delta. So we're working closely with them, but I don't have the exact volume number.
But I think the stockpile, and again, the reason it caught my attention is that we've had a lot of conversation, certainly in a lot of different forums, about emergency response and being prepared. And we had testimony for this council, and we have, again, in other bodies that I've sit on and heard as well, the need to have some ability to rapidly respond and to have the material, because just as you pointed out, showing how you bring it in by truck and or barge, just ramping up to do that, even in an emergency situation, takes time. It's valuable if you're going to maybe have a better outcome early on to curb whatever the issue is, and whether it's seismic or some other aspect of that. So I think it's important because as we've talked about this in different contexts, is to have the material available in the Delta and to be able to respond to those events and have it stored close by. So I'm glad to see that. I just was curious about how much material extra you would have there, and I don't need to have a tonnage, but is it a significant amount of material?
I think it's what we could do with the dollars left over. I think to answer your question, we probably could store more. Yeah. But it was enough. We thought that if there was an emergency in one of the islands, that we could quickly mobilize and get a contractor out there, and the riprap would already be there, which is very helpful. As you said, it takes time to coordinate with a quarry and to get material delivered.
And if you're getting good bids, I mean, obviously, it may both on material and certainly on the aspect of labor. It seemed to me, again, dollars are very precious, and you want to do as much work to, repair the levees, but I think having that material available for future utilization and getting it in place now, economies of scale relative to the equipment and being geared up to do what you're doing out there, I just think it makes good sense, and I'm certainly glad to see that. So.
Mr. Nordhoff, then Mr. Grindstaff.
Several meetings ago, we had a session on the stability of the levees, and I remember the topic came up about the benefits of putting trees and other forms of vegetation there, and I remember that we were divided on that, or the experts were divided. Some said, yeah, it's a good idea because it makes sense, and other people said, no, it was disruptive and it destroyed the stability. Obviously, we came down on the side of the pro-tree group, because we are planting trees. Can you explain that, why you did that?
I'm happy to address that. And you're correct, and the debate continues today. And the Corps of Engineers technically do not support the tree plantings. However, these are non-project levies, so they're not. If they were project levies, you'd have to abide by the Corps of Engineers. Since these are non-project levies, the reclamation districts, DWR, Fish and Wildlife, and U.S. Fish and DF&G have partnered. And what they've requested is they would like to see the tree plantings. And because, as Don pointed out, we're so much increasing the setback of the levee, adding so much material that they feel that it's still improves the stability of the levee while at the same time meeting the co-equal goals of having riverine habitat there. So these are doing tree plantings, and we're confident we're still improving the stability of the levees. We're probably spending maybe a little more money, maybe building bigger setbacks to accommodate that, but that's part of meeting the co-equal goals, I think, of the Stewardship Council. Does that answer your question?
It certainly addresses the question. It doesn't really answer the concern I have about the Corps of Engineers recommending one thing and we're doing another thing. And it's all about the stability, I guess, of the Delta being primary to the views.
Right, and I would
think.
And I think you can get different people with different opinions, and you can get different geotechnical engineers as far as what they think as far as how stable a levee is, and we're definitely significantly improving the stability of these levees. Right now, the Corps' position is they don't want the tree planting, but that's not everyone's position, and we're just working collaboratively with the partners and hearing it. I'm an engineer, and I'm very conservative, but sometimes you need to look at the bigger picture, and I think what we're doing is working with all the stakeholders to meet the co-equal goals. I can confidently tell you the stability of these levees are greatly improved with these projects, and I don't want to opine about the tree planting any more than just tell what the facts are, but because they're non-project levees, we are allowed to do the tree planting, and that's something that's been supported by DWR, by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Fish and Game, and a lot of engineers in the that are working the field. You get different opinions.
But are you saying that if the slope were greater, that it may not be beneficial to the stability to plant the trees, but because the slope is so gradual, it doesn't really make any difference?
That's kind of our position, that we're so buttressing up these slopes by adding so much material and flattening out the slopes, and we're building it back so far that we're allowed to plant trees. We're spending more money. We could buttress these up and spend less money, but we want to do what's right for the environment too. So we're adding so much material that from our professional standpoint, it's okay to do the tree plantings and still provide the riverine habitat. You could spend less money and not build it up as much, meet the core standards, and not plant trees too. So we're buttressing it up more. Yeah, and we've made a decision with these projects. We want to meet the co-equal goals.
Mr. Nomalini, on behalf of the district, wants to weigh in here.
Yeah, the Corps of Engineers requirements on project levees allow for vegetation that's beyond 15 feet from the waterside toe and beyond 15 feet from the landside toe. So it isn't an absolute prohibition of vegetation. And the project levees typically are in a more riverine setting, where the trees can remain outside this setback. For the Delta, these projects, only a segment of the project is actually habitat setback. It's very expensive to build the levee 20 feet wider to accommodate it. And the idea is that extra 20 feet is somewhat sacrificial to the structural stability of the levee, and therefore you can respond to the threats associated with the trees. There are some problems with trees in the structural section, but the structural section has been moved back. So in these areas, it's more expensive, but in effect, the trees are not on the structural section of the levee.
But the trees are down to the water line?
Well, we're staying above the ordinary high water mark, and the tides, come up and down. So during very high stages in the Delta, in these areas, these areas are in the Delta pool. They're not in the riverine transition areas. So the trees are going to shade the water. So they're going to be this shaded riverine aquatic habitat. And for example, we have out of perhaps 5 miles, like 2,500 feet. And the engineers have picked the sections that correspond to where we're pretty confident it's not going to aggravate in any way the stability of the levee. And they're allowing us to rock around the trees, so we can keep the soil from eroding rapidly. And from a pure engineering standpoint, it'd probably be better not to have it, but the program has an important element of habitat enhancement, and it's an element that had to be added to satisfy the legislative mandates associated with the funding. And I think it'll work. We have to.
Let's hope so.
Well, let's go look at it. Maybe if you got time, go take a look. You'll see that the levees have been substantially improved in these areas, and I think you get a certain amount of comfort when you see it. Stockpiling, on that issue, Don, out of the 2 million tons, for example, we probably might have 50,000 tons of stockpile, but that's like 50 barges. I mean, it's not insignificant. It's not what is being done. There's $50 million already separately appropriated for stockpiling in the Delta, both sheet pile and rock, associated with the effort to be able to respond, to restore export pumping in the event of this catastrophic 25 levee failure. So these stockpiles are in addition to that effort. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer more questions.
Is it possible to know how much extra we're paying in order to be able to put the trees?
I have a number.
Is it a good number?
I think so. It's about $500 a foot, a running foot more. It's like $2.5 million a mile to do the habitat setback.
Could you do that on a percentage basis? In other words, it would have been X.
It doubles, more than doubles the cost per foot in order to do the setback to accommodate the vegetation. It's something that those of us involved in the Delta think it ought to be done judiciously. If you added that on top of everything, you add very significantly to the cost of the project that we think should be done, and that's to bring the Delta levees up to the PL 84-99 standards. So if you got to move your section 20 feet back, and the reason is that the existing levee system is on somewhat consolidated foundation. It's been there for a long time. So as we move landward, we get on more unconsolidated soil. So when somebody starts talking to you about a setback levee, where you don't have any consolidation of the soft foundations, those costs really go up high. So we see some of it, but it's done in moderation. In other words, the program is judiciously allocating segments of the funding for this enhancement. It's not taking all the funding. It's taking a small percentage.
Has the height of the crown increased as a result of all of this?
The crown that we're building to is a minimum of 22 feet. Where you have the setback, it's another 20 feet. So it's at least 42 feet where we have trees. The widened crown is to accommodate, in the event these wide or high sea level predictions occur, you can easily slope up to 55 inches.
But right now, the height hasn't increased at all, just the width.
Where we've done, some of these projects are raising height, where the levee system is near or below what we call HMP. Then when we go in and do that work, we bring it up to the Corps of Engineers standard plus 6 inches to accommodate settlement. So where we tear it up, we're bringing it up to that elevation. When I say we, Department of Water Resources, East Bay Mud, we've got a team of people that are collaborating on this effort and working closely together with Fish and Game, trying to do this balancing thing. And it's working out fairly well.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Grindstaff, then Ms. Gray, then Mr. Grindstaff.
I just wanted to make a comment. The projects that you have done is very good in the sense that I think the success that the collaboration and partnership have had in terms of moving the process. It's great to know that a process can move as fast as it has done in terms of what you have done. I wanted you to kind of refresh my memory. The other projects that would be brought back here, are they levee improvement projects? And how many in total are non-project levees that you will use the same process in terms of the vegetation? Are all of them going to be used through the same process?
Yeah, so to answer your question, the 5 that were approved and then the 4 that are before you today, it's the same process. It's continuing to buttress the levees, improve the stability, and likewise, we'd be following the same process. We're working closely with DFG and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. They're all non-project levees. And so, to answer your question, the 4 that are before you today, we plan on following the exact same process. We hope to move as quickly. We hope that if they're approved today, we'd advertise in February, we would award it in March, issue notice to proceed by the end of March, and take advantage of spring and summer to get the work done for those 4 projects. And then the one remaining project, which may not be back for about 5 months because we're working through the complex environmental issues, that one, once again, is a non-project levy and it would be the same. It would follow the same process as far as we're adding material to widening the crown, the top of the levee, and flattening out the slope. And then, as Dante said, we're judiciously figuring out where are the best places, working with U.S. Fish and Game and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Department of Fish and Game to figure out where it's best to spend the money to do the river habitat. We don't do it throughout all the levee projects. So in certain places they say, oh, this would be really beneficial, and then that's where we decide we're going to build a habitat setback levee, the extra 20 feet, do the tree planting.
So you assess each levee before you make that decision?
Yes.
And all total, will there be 10 non-project levies that you complete?
That would, correct. There's the 5 before, and then the 4 today, and then there'll be 1 more coming back.
How many non-project levies are there?
I'm not sure.
High risk factor.
Well, all of these projects with a small p are non-project levees.
Right.
So in the Delta, we have 1,100 miles of levees in the Delta. 700 of those miles are non-project levees. And then we have Suisun Marsh, which is all non-project levees, another couple hundred miles. So altogether about 900 miles of non-project levees within the territory that the council has jurisdiction.
And these were chosen based on?
In this case, they were chosen first to protect the water supply, and so it was part of the legislation that appropriated the funding for this. And so they picked the islands that would protect the aqueduct, and then went in and analyzed where should we do the ecological improvements as well as improve flood protection.
Well, your work is very important, so thank you.
Thank you.